Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to World at War Comics. I have a very special guest, the award-winning storytelling artist, Mr. Bryan Hitch. Bryan, thank you so much for being with me today. Super excited to get to know you a little bit. Been a fan of your work for a very long time. You probably hear that on every podcast that you do. But congratulations on a successful Ghost Machine Day. We got your Redcoat right here, which was a blast to read. And
Thank you.
yeah, I'm really excited to get into it.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yeah. So I thought maybe what we would talk about, Bryan, if that's okay, is how did Bryan become part of this whole Ghost Machine with all these all-stars? I was telling Kat earlier, it's like an all-star team of all these great comic creators, artists, right? All that good stuff coming together. I feel like you could call it the Hall of Fame if you wanted to.
Well, some of us knew each other. I mean, Geoff knew, obviously, he'd worked with Jay and Gary on various DC things, and Gary pretty much exclusively for the last 20 years or something. They've been working together. s- Geoff and I met actually at a DC creator conference, which was what ultimately became the Rebirth stuff. Um, and we just immediately got on. We had, although we come from different places, we have a lot of very similar cultural interests, backgrounds, especially the love of Superman the movie, and he worked with Dick Donner, and so we had no trouble chatting. We thought we he was doing Justice League, I was doing JLA, and we just kept in touch, and promised constantly that we'd work together. When Geoff was over here shooting various things with for DC, the movies, we'd go out, we'd have dinner, we'd talk about potential projects, and it was, I think there was kind of Gary and he had already done Geiger, I think, by the point we started discussing what became Redcoat. And it was just one of those moments where we thought we started talking about doing some stuff for DC Justice Society amongst them. Um, and then this idea for what ultimately became Redcoat. It wasn't Redcoat then, but it was something else. And we just thought, why don't we just do this ourselves? It's just, this doesn't have to be a DC or a Marvel book, just the way I think Geiger grew out of an idea they may have once had for doing a Hulk story. And obviously, it's not the Hulk, and it's a very different story. But the genesis of some of this stuff, you start to think, well, actually, I can do it differently. We can do it ourselves. So the idea was then we were going to do Redcoat as just as an image comic, the way Geiger had been done, and we introduced him in that 80-page giant a couple of years ago. But we both had other work. Geoff was on Stargirl. I had a couple of Marvel projects. I did that long Venom run. I had the Superman book to do around both that and Ultimate Invasion. Um, and it was at least a year ago, and possibly a year past January, we started discussing seriously um, doing something all together. I think it was Geoff and Gary really that kind of got the ball rolling, but it was an evolution more than a decision. Um, but in earnest, about a year ago, we started working on ultimately what became the company, the Ghost Machine, and Geoff started bringing in some other people like Pete and Francis and so on. So there wasn't ever like there wasn't ever the we're putting together this Ghost Machine thing. It was an evolution over quite a long period. Um, but I think quite early on, especially the four of us, Geoff, Jay, Gary, and me, saw the potential for what it could become. And not just the comics, we have a much longer term, bigger scale kind of picture in mind. Comics are just, I would say, comics are a passion for all of us, but they're the foundational level of what we're trying to do with Ghost Machine. And comics will always be first for us because we just love making great comics. So whatever else happens, we will still be making those comics. But I think we saw the potential for it, and it was exciting in a way that I think work hadn't been exciting, especially for me, for a very long time. So I was very keen to see if we could actually reach the potential we imagined for this, especially personally, for whether I could do well, I mean, Redcoat is what we wanted to do, but we have, there is a larger world with Redcoat, and it will be ultimately the longest, if we do this right, run I'll ever do on a book, because this will probably be the rest of my career. There'll be other projects within Ghost Machine, spin-offs, additions, new creations, and so on. But I will still always be doing the Redcoat Monthly, and that's just non-negotiable. I don't want anybody else. People, we can get some other really cool guys to do additional material, but nobody's touching the monthly. It's my book. That's it. Um, so that it just I feel invigorated and impassioned in a way actually I haven't felt for a long time, and I didn't realize I hadn't felt like that, because I was always interested in drawing, getting up and drawing and doing as good work as I could, and the characters I was fortunate to get to work with. But actually, just this is a level of creative freedom and involvement and collaboration that had really been missing. So we came for those really terrific opportunities, but ultimately the reason we're doing it is because we all are an amazing group of people. We just love hanging out with each other and working together, and we're in constant contact, all of us, in one way or another. And I hadn't realized that had been missing from a very long-term working life. That's beyond any level of collaboration. Maybe it came close with people like Warren and Mark, but it isn't the same as this has become. It really is. I think it surprised all of us when we got together in October last year for what became our inaugural company retreat, and then the New York Comic Con. And I'm sorry, this is a very waffly answer, but
No, it's beautiful. Yeah.
we were a group of relative strangers. Some of us knew each other, a few knew each other a little bit, some well. But what happened that week was quite extraordinary in the way we developed into a genuine team, of family at that. And it was proven when we all got together again, minus Gary sadly, but we all got together again in Orlando for MegaCon, and realized, as Francis Manapul put it, that wasn't a fluke in New York. It was a wonderful reunion, even though it had only been a few months ago. And we speak all the time, but just to get together, creative stuff flies, discussions happen, we just have a good time, and we spend a lot of time laughing. And I think that's the other side to Ghost Machine that you don't see just because the comics are coming out. You don't see just how much we love all working together as part of this.
Yeah. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bryan, I would love your opinion on this, but when you have a career as storied as yours and as long as yours, sometimes you do need, something to refresh your career. And it sounds
Yeah.
like Ghost Machine has done that for you. Has there ever been another part of your career where you've had that experience where you felt refreshed after a long run or something like that? Or is this kind of the peak of that freshness after your career?
New projects always bring a certain amount of that, because
Mhm.
you always kind of know when you're coming to the end of something. I knew when I was coming to the end of Venom that I was ready to go. I was tired. I punted away at a lot of very challenging scheduling problems, and still maintained a monthly book relentlessly for 16 issues. It doesn't sound a lot, but there were some double ships and extra sized issues in that as well. And we still hit it. But there's a point at which I knew I needed a break, and the thing is that it's not my character, so I also knew that once I'd stepped back once, I was not going to step back in again. I'd be done. I'd be looking for something new. And I'd already got the Ultimate Invasion thing lined up and so on. So, projects generally aren't so all-encompassing that there is never an end point in sight. And you always, there's always a daily excitement because the next page is always interesting. The next issue is always interesting. And the point at which it's not is the point at which it's probably time to find something else to do. So there's always a sense of renewal when a new project happens. But this is different. This is genuinely different. I mean, Jeff and I were just talking earlier today about this. It's just about how um, terrific the reactions have been to the books. And I haven't had a response like that probably since the Ultimates. and I don't feel like I've been as engaged with work as I have since the Ultimates. I think first issue of Redcoat is probably the best first issue of anything I've done since the Ultimates, and that's a long time ago. But in terms of the sense of I'm onto something here, this feels new, this feels great, this feels really invigorating, and I'm excited about really where this can go, what with stories we can tell. It feels unlimited. That's invigorating in a really huge way, because there isn't a day I don't get excited about coming back in here to do work or talk to Geoff about the next batch of stories, because we're already plotting well into the next year of stuff. So yeah, it was needed, I think, but I didn't realize how much it was needed till it happened.
Yeah. Can you kind of walk through how the idea of Redcoat came to life? The character himself, the storyline, like how long have you been plotting this particular story, and how long have you had Redcoat kind of in your heart wanting to put it on the pages of a comic book?
Again, it's a gradual evolution. In fact, when we first did that introductory story, I think the idea of magic was a bit of a late addition even then.
Mm,
But Simon, um, as he now is, wasn't that character then. There was possibly a hint at it, but in the time we've got to know each other, especially building up Ghost Machine, Simon's changed, and Simon's changed for a number of reasons. Most of them very personal to Geoff and I in terms of our own particular life journey. And it's gone from being a concept-led action adventure book to first and foremost a character journey. Um, so really, this story about Simon and about his journey through his own life, going from somebody who isn't particularly good at anything, doesn't really believe in anything, doesn't care about anybody because he's never been cared about in his life ever, um, just accidentally stumbling into this, huge, mythical, mystical, world-changing series of adventures, and none of which are his. It's his choice to be in, but it's really the story of how Simon grows as a person. I mean, if you look at, or I was using this analogy yesterday, you look at the movie like Groundhog Day, and the day is reset. Simon gets that same reset every time. The time doesn't get reset, but you know, his death and resurrections constantly. And if you look at Bill Murray's character arc in that, about uh, the way he changes and develops, he goes from like disbelief, denial to this could be fun, I could be outrageous, I can get away with anything, to the darker, I can't stand this anymore, to finally learning to change and embrace the growth personally that offers. That too is what Simon's story is, and we're going to be telling that story over, I don't know, 100 issues or so, and several centuries. Um, and but it's essentially Simon's personal therapy until he self-actualizes at the end of it. But it's set against this fantastical, mythical Pirates of the Caribbean, Indiana Jones level backdrop. But ultimately, it's a very personal story for Simon. It's going to go to some pretty dark places, as comedic as it can get. Um, so but it's a journey about, as the best stories are, I think, a journey about human nature and the human condition, and it's different for everybody. And it's ultimately become a character story, not and the character isn't the same character he started out being 2 years ago when we first developed it.
you know, I've heard in interviews from comedians like Robin Williams, Jim Carrey, and they talk about a lot of the suffering that they've gone through, and that comedy is kind of a way to either put a band-aid over some of those sufferings, to work through those sufferings. I'm wondering with Simon, because he does have that kind of comedic side to him, um, do you think he is utilizing comedy for the same thing, pertaining to what you had just said, his life maybe not being satisfied on some portions of his life, learning to mature? Is there any relationship to that in your character?
Um, I don't think he's probably aware enough to make those sort of things. I think Simon is, I mean, he's not exactly an idiot, but he's just he doesn't care. He doesn't care who he insults. He doesn't care whether he's liked or disliked. He doesn't care about anybody, anybody's feelings. He's literally just drifting through um, the epic potential of his own life. And it's the great littleness of every single day and eating and sleeping and possibly having relations with women if they'll let him, but he doesn't have much luck there either, despite how good looking he might be. Um, he's stuck. The humor I think comes from the absurdity of his situation, um, and also writing characters like Albert Einstein into a young Albert Einstein who's just
Yeah.
an absolute hoot. Um, but yeah, I don't think we're trying to make comedy, but we want the book to be fun, no matter how bad it. But the emotions have to be absolutely real, no matter how much or they always say take your comedy seriously. Um, but so we're not there to take the piss out of Simon particularly, because his emotional journey is very real and it has to feel real, and you have to be engaged with it as much as he has to engage with it. So I don't think Simon's using comedy. I don't think Simon is even probably aware enough that he might occasionally be amusing. I don't think anybody else finds him amusing in his world, at least
I
of all
don't
the
think
people
so.
he actually meets. It's just, but the humor comes from the way Geoff and I talk about him and talk to each other. I think some of my appreciation of the absurdities of life and comedy and I love finding humor in hard areas, because I suppose I always used it as a deflection, and a defense. When anything got a bit too serious or too personal, I would always go that way. But I'm a sarcastic English bugger, so it works perfectly for Simon.
Yeah, I think so. And the fact that he can never quench his hunger, where did that come from? He
Just
eats,
an
but he's
idea.
always hungry, right?
It was just an idea that Geoff had. It kind of makes a degree of sense, I suppose. His body's in a constant state of renewal. He's going to have to find the energy from somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, Simon has no idea what he's capable of, both in terms of his own life and the power he's been gifted, because he doesn't even know what the power is. As far as he's aware, he's killed and then he wakes up, and that's as far as he thinks the extent of it reaches. He has no concept of what he's really capable of doing, and we'll find that out and quite early on. Um, but alas, yeah, I'm not going to spoil that. But yeah,
No, 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 don't.
Simon,
I don't want to, I don't want to spoil it for
it's
anybody.
the first example, one of the earliest examples in the story of Simon failing to learn uh to learn any kind of from any of his mistakes, and actually improve himself, which is a constant for Simon.
Yeah, incredible. Is it okay if we talk a little bit about your career outside of Ghost
Sure,
Machine and then revisit Ghost Machine? Because you've had
absolutely.
a storied career. You've worked on just about every major title of importance, which is absolutely incredible.
Been
But
a long run. Yeah.
yeah. I had the honor of having Simon Furman on the
Oh yeah.
podcast
Simon.
last year, and I know early on in your career you got to work on Transformers, and I believe there was one other title, Death's Head, right? With Simon, is
Well,
that correct?
actually, Simon was the editor. Simon and Richard Starkins were the two editors, who senior editors at Marvel UK back in the 80s, middle late 80s anyway. They were doing the Transformers, and Action Force was one of Richard's books, which is essentially GI Joe, but the European characters like um, I think Lady Jane, and somebody else in a beret whose name escapes me. Anyway, I sent Simon. I was 16 at the time, and I sent Simon Furman some samples of various things, including Transformers and Action Force, and um, and the way Richard Starkings tells it was that the samples had sat on Simon's desk for a while with his intention to call me for a Transformers job, and weeks went on, and he hadn't. So Richard swiped the samples and called me, got me to do Action Force. So I did a few Action Force stories first, and then a few Transformers stories. Whereas actually the one I really wanted to do was Thundercats, because it was the most superhero like. But yeah, Simon and Rich gave me my start back in the day.
Incredible.
I've been friends with Simon ever since. Actually, Simon, I came from a small town in the north of England, in Carlisle, which Geoff Senior also grew up in.
Mm.
And Though funnily enough, Geoff and I both ended up moving to London. But Simon, at one point had moved had been up to visit Geoff, and ended up in a long-term relationship with somebody in Carlisle that he met whilst visiting Geoff. I remember bizarrely when this was probably the very early 90s, um, walking out of my grandmother's house and bumping directly into Simon, which is the most peculiar thing, because the woman he was in a relationship with lived several doors up from my grandmother, and I had no idea why Simon was in Carlisle until I nearly knocked him over. But anyway, yeah, Simon and I have a kind of, yeah, he's one of those people you just, uh, even if I don't see him for years on end, I'll just go for a drink with him, and we just pick up where we left off. It's funny that really, but yeah, I owe him and Rich my beginnings.
Incredible. And then I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about Paul Neary.
Mm,
A huge loss this year of an icon in
yeah,
comics. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship with him? He had an amazing career, obviously in the UK, editor in chief.
yeah.
You kind of walk through working with him on some of the titles and what he meant to comic books.
Well, Paul's been in comics since longer than I was alive.
The
So
70s, right?
yeah, that's right. I was born in 1970. I think he got his start in 69. I think with the Warren books, drawing Hunter. I think he was pretty much just still in university when he started. He was studying metallurgy, if I remember rightly, in uni when he got his start on Hunter.
Oh,
So
wow.
Paul's was more of a scientist than a comic book, but he was a real comic book nerd. I mean, he's got an amazing collection. And for as long as I knew him, he was constantly searching out rare finds by particular artists like Gray Morrow and Wally Wood and the like, who are very much his favorites. Carmine Infantino as well. But Paul I mean, I knew of Paul through his work. I'd seen his work on the Captain America stuff, and especially inking Alan Davis on the DC stuff, which I was buying as a kid, as a fan. And I knew his work from the earlier Marvel UK books in the very late 70s. He'd done a bunch of covers, including some Captain America ones for some reprint weekly comics, which I'd bought. So I knew the name.
Yeah.
But he'd come up to visit Steve Parkhouse, who also lived in Carlisle. Steve Parkhouse, who does Alien Resident with Peter Hogan at Dark Horse. So Steve was the first comic book artist I actually met, the first professional. I was 15, 16, I think 15. Steve's wife had worked at the local art college as well as being a letterer. And through the art college, I'd been introduced to Steve. And Steve was something of a mentor for years, actually, while I lived up there. But Annie and Steve told me that Paul was going back to be editor in chief at Marvel UK, and he was coming up for dinner. Did I want to come along and meet him? And I did. That was the first time I met Paul, was at Steve and Annie's house, and we got on quite well. And he persuaded me to do some work for Marvel UK, and I was kind of floundering a bit at DC at the time. Um, nothing particularly to do with the people I was working with. I think it was really personal things, actually. That I was 21, 22, and struggling with a lot of things, as one does. And so I came down to London. I said I'd come. I might do a project with the Marvel UK stuff. Paul said, "Why don't you come down for the weekend, and see what we've got set up and see what you think of it?" So I came down. Liam Sharp was working in a small office in the Marvel building doing the first issue of Death's Head. I'd already done the original Death's Head, as you remember, with Geoff Senior co-created him with Simon. Then I did the first Death's Head book way back when, and this was Death's Head 2, Dan Abnett writing. So yeah, so I went there. We had a really nice weekend, and Liam had said that he might struggle to get the book done by the deadline, but you might need a bit of help. I said, I'll stay and help. So so I stayed for a couple of weeks and helped So Liam and I and Andy Lanning jamming on that first issue of Death's Head in what was the boardroom of Marvel UK, having a really fun time. And in the pub one evening, an old friend of Liam said, he was getting a divorce. He was moving back into the flat that Liam used to share with him. Did he know anybody who might want to rent a room? And I said, yeah, I'll take it. So I moved down like a week later and joined Marvel UK.
Wow.
So that was my first relationship with Paul, was actually as editor in chief. But he was very much a mentor to all of us younger chaps. And then the year later, when Marvel UK started winding up, a year or two later, Paul said he was going to go back to inking again, and I think the first thing he did was something with George Perez, and then he did the Marvel versus DC stuff, the Claudio Castellini pages. Um, but then he and I started working together. I say I was still very young. Well, was I 23 then? And again, as something of a mentor and guide through too much shit to mention, personally and professionally. We worked together for years, best part of 25 years actually. um, Styles grew and changed. I got married, had children, many of them.
I
um,
heard, yeah. You have five,
um,
right?
I've got five, yeah.
Yeah, well, I have four.
Five.
I thought that was
Okay, I've got five boys. The oldest is just 29 now. So,
oh wow.
yeah. So it was a long relationship, and Paul actually genuinely was probably, I think, one of the best inkers the industry's ever produced. An absolute master of texture, and as detailed as my work could be, he always managed to find other ways of enhancing it. Absolutely stunning at times. There are some pages I still look at and I have no concept of how he got the line he did and added the texture that and figured stuff out. It was extremely well considered always. Um, so yeah, we worked together for a very long time and gradually, professionally and personally, drifted apart, as sometimes happens. So I hadn't seen Paul for um, I don't know, 8 years maybe. I think 2016 maybe was the last time I saw him.
Yeah.
Um, I'd heard he'd got sick, um, but I say I haven't been in touch with him for a while. So it's a loss certainly, and I'm sad that he's gone, and I'm especially sad that I suppose I didn't get to reconnect with him before that. But
Yeah. Well, you had an opportunity to work on the Authority with him and Warren Ellis, correct?
well, no, actually, Paul and I were working together at the time. Warren and I were doing Stormwatch. Paul was inking me at the time, whatever I was doing. Um, so he just came with me as I was with the next project. So yeah, the Authority kind of that grew out of Stormwatch. I mean, Stormwatch was going to be my attempt to earn a bit of pocket money because I was going to go and do some storyboarding work. I'd been in touch with some of the people on the animated Batman show that storyboarded that and said there was an opportunity there. But I mean, I was very unhappy. I wasn't really getting the projects I wanted to do and the stories I wanted to draw. And I was floundering. I really couldn't seem to get a break to do anything.
Mm.
Um, and that was affecting my ability to deliver work, to do good work. Um, the perennial need, inability to make deadlines. We're always tied up, I think, with mental health issues for me, for a long time. So the Stormwatch thing, I came onto because the artist whose name escapes me, Oliver Jimenez,
Oh,
who worked for a long time as Carlos Pacheco's inker. Um, but he sort of drifted off the book or didn't deliver it anyway, for whatever reasons I don't know. So I knew of Warren, um, but just something clicked on that book. I don't know what it was. It wasn't ever supposed to be something I was going to be interested in doing. It was literally I was doing it for the paycheck, so I could leave comics. Um, and it seemed to work. It was the first time I think I'd actually had a positive reaction from I mean, I wasn't online, I wasn't on the internet. Warren was. He was in chat rooms and, you know, cultivating his personality group. Yeah, but he was saying the reactions are terrific. You know, you should stay with Wildstorm and do some more stuff. And Jim said, you know, you can do some more stuff. We've got Alan Moore's going to be doing some stuff. And I was like, I know Alan Moore is amazing, but I almost I whilst I was doing the Stormwatch stuff, there was an issue of Wildcats or something that Travis was supposed to have delivered and didn't at that point. So they said, you know, would you do this chunk of pages? And they sent me the Alan Moore script, and I read through about 4 or 5 pages of it, and that was panel one of a particular page. It was this really, it's really complicated kind of Spartan arrives in the battle scene and does this, this, and this, and this, and it was really, high end, high demand work. In the end, actually, Travis turned in a bunch of pages and I didn't do it. But what was funny was when I saw that page in print, all of that had literally been distilled into a single flying figure of Spartan that was mostly silhouette. And I thought, yeah, that's not what I got from the script. Anyway, so there was some talk of, so that, you know, Scott Dumbier had talked to me about maybe doing this book, which ultimately became Promethea. And I was wrong for it. I could see that when I was reading it, that Alan was looking for something that I didn't think I was going to be capable of doing. It just didn't fit right, actually. And then there was going to another one that Scott Lobdell was going to write. And I told Warren this, and he's like, oh, because he said Warren had replaced Stormwatch in his schedule with Planetary, so he didn't really have time for another book. But I told him about that anyway. So I went out, I did the shopping, came back, and there was a voicemail message from Warren, which basically said, "You can't work with Scott Lobdell. I can't do that to you. So I'll write something else." And then literally an hour later, this thing came through, like half a page of A4 type came through the fax. The Authority, the old Stormwatch characters, are going to start a new kick-ass world-saving team, big scale, broad strokes, 3 story arcs, 4 issues each. And I called him up. I said, I want to do ground level stuff. I want to do big shizzle. You know, I want blockbuster stuff. And he said, no, that's what I mean. He said, just because we're using Jenny and those characters, we're just going to take them to like Justice League scale. They're going to be it. And then within a second, I said, we've got to have a 50-mile long spaceship then powered by a caged baby universe. That stuck. And when the second arc, I said, when the guys from the other Earth invade ours and invade the carrier, said we got to do it on horseback because make life easier for myself. So we immediately that stuff just worked, and it was literally a joy, page to page, week to week. And it was the first time I'd done a monthly book. The first time I'd ever done 12 consecutive issues of anything on time. It was just really it was a game-changing year for me, that. And I did a couple of other. I mean, I actually did something like 15 issues over a year because there were 12 Authority issues, a Martian Manhunter, a couple of shorts, 10-page shorts, and an issue of Wildcats. I did that all in the same 12 months. So I was really kind of working hard that year. I just a funny story actually. Scott Dumbier came over, and we went out for dinner in London. And he said, I hear you're going to be doing an issue of Martian Manhunter for Pete at DC, Pete Tomasi, who's obviously with Ghost Machine now. It's funny. And I said, yeah. He said, I'm going to counsel you against taking that on. You're well ahead on Authority. You're doing great. Nobody ever has to look at a schedule. He said, but doing another book on top of that, he said, it's an absolute mistake. There's no way you'll get it done. I said, oh, I finished it 2 weeks ago. And he said, do you want to do an issue of Wildcats? So I did.
That worked out.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was because Travis was running late, so I did this issue with Scott Lobdell, which I think I drew in about 5 days. It was so ridiculously quick, but yeah. Anyway, it was that year on Authority was a genuine game changer. But apart from having a really good time working well with Warren, it was the first time I'd ever thought in a way that trusted myself enough to be able to do the book the way I wanted, because the material, I understood the material, I understood what Warren was trying to do. It tallied with how I thought I wanted to draw comics. And instead of saying to myself, "Oh God, how would Alan Davis do this? How would John Byrne do this? How would they solve these problems?" I did it my way and trusted myself to do it, and it seemed to work. It wasn't always great, but it seemed to mostly work. And actually bringing Simon Furman back into this. So we were a few issues published. I think it might have been up to issue 7 by that point. I met Simon for a drink in London, and he brought a copy of an old Transformers comic I'd drawn for him. And I said, "Oh, what are you bringing that in for?" And he said, "I want you to have a look at it." And I sort of thumbed through it again and said, "Yeah, it's all right. It's a bit crude, but I was only, it's 17 or something."
Yeah.
And he said, "No, look at the storytelling." And I was looking, and I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "It's the same as the Authority." He said it's more basic, it's crude, it's not as well thought out yet, but it's there. It was there from the beginning. You just didn't trust yourself."
Wow.
And I thought, fuck, I hadn't seen that, but he'd seen it, which I was really touched by. But yeah, so yeah, that was and it worked. It was a really popular book. So although I'd had 12 years before that, 12 years to become an overnight success, as I often say. Um, the Authority was the book that changed the game for me in many ways.
Yeah. I mean, now with James Gunn and taking over, the DCU, it looks like some of those stories you worked on might come to the animated screen. So we'll see, huh?
Well, I know there's supposed to be a live action Authority movie, and the only the engineers in Superman in some form. So I don't know. I have no contact with any of that stuff. So I have no idea what it might end up looking like or being like. I'm sure they'll go their own way with it.
Yeah, yeah. We're all just kind of making up stuff, I think, after we heard that it's coming out. So none of us really know, but it's fun to talk about, I guess.
No, I didn't even know anything about it until I heard the announcement with everybody else. Nobody tells me anything.
That doesn't sound good.
Another reason why, it's another nail
Yeah, yeah.
in the box of Ghost Machine. It's
I
why
know exactly.
another reason why we want to do this stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Co-create and co-control all of the stuff that we're building.
Yeah. I feel like for someone who has accomplished, I think, pretty much everything that you could outside of Ghost Machine, I feel like Ghost Machine is almost a reward to those who have really need to and deserve to own their own properties, right?
Well, we all feel like it's a reward because it feels. It's not like not any of us have really got complaints about our careers. There's a lot of
Yeah.
times I've made mistakes and I've screwed up opportunities that I could have taken or things I could have done better. God knows life's full of those things. I mean, this all informs our take on Simon, to a degree, but Simon Pure anyway, not Simon Furman.
Yeah.
But it just feels like with Ghost Machine, it's an opportunity to do everything the way we want to do it, get it right, follow the passions for the creativity, but also, ensure that, the larger elements of media exploitation are still ours. Obviously in partnerships, but they're ours. Yeah, I mean the way we describe it is like if all the guys who created Batman, Superman, and all those DC characters. What if they owned DC? Because that's the way Ghost Machine is, and that's what we're building it towards. Something like on that scale, that's what we want it to be. But at heart, still at its foundations, people who are passionate about creating the best comics they possibly can. Because we know, I've seen this thrown up on message boards and comment sections that they're just creating templates for TV, pitches for TV and movies. That's not what we're doing at all. Yeah, we'd love to exploit them in that way, but that's not what we're doing. We're creating the best comics we can create, with disregarding whether they're going to become film or TV. I mean, yes, it's an IP company in that we're creating character-based IP like Superman, Batman, our character-based IPs. But we live in a world where those things, comics, as much as we all love them, are not mass media. They're just not. It's an expensive hobby market. That's really what it is. Um, and we love making stuff for that market. And God, we hope that market sticks around for the next 100 years because we're passionate about making the material. But we also live in a world where that, the video games, especially film, TV, mass media is it's there. It's going to be done, and better that we do it and build that than farm it out to or have no control over it in the way that the work at Marvel and DC is for whatever contributions we made, we have nothing to do with the way they are filmed. I don't even get any money for it. It's just the way it is. So that's that. So yeah, we feel like Ghost Machine is something we've spent all our careers earning an opportunity to build.
I do feel it's a better fan experience too when that kind of passion behind the writing, behind the art, behind the storytelling comes through. And I mean, you're a fan of comic books too. You could tell when you're reading a comic book whether the creators, the writers, the artists are really into the character that they're developing. And you have dry periods. And again, I'm not a creator writer at that level, so I'm not sure what the experience is. But you go through ups and downs, and you could
Mhm.
read that as a fan, and you can almost feel those up and downs, right? Where maybe the run has gone too long, and maybe I need something different to do because I've been doing this for a year and a half or 2 years, and I'd like to
Yeah,
try something
it drifts
else.
into it. It definitely drifts into a day job at times. I'm certainly, I think the last few years been more of an art robot than
Mhm.
a feeling like a genuine creator.
Yeah.
Um, and that's unsatisfactory for everybody because I'm not I'm producing competent work, but it's not work that exudes passion. And I think I yesterday when Redcoat came out, I had when I got my comps, in fact even going back further when the coloring comes in, instead of just giving it a cursory look and thinking, yep, that's fine. Moving on, I was just uh, amazed by what Brad had done and passionate about, and it just was exciting to see yet another level to the art. Um, and and beautiful print. The print is just amazing. The paper stock, the print quality, the card level covers. It's a beautiful product, and that's the first time I think I've actually genuinely been interested in looking at one of my books in print since the Ultimates,
Oh wow.
um, which I was equally passionate about and delighted to see in print. I genuinely don't like to see my work in print because I like the process of doing it. By the time it's been inked by somebody else and colored by somebody else, it feels I'm somewhat removed from it. I can see that it works, it's competent, does the job, it's fine, but I'm disassociated somewhat from it. Not so with this. I'm passionate about seeing it all the way through and actually working with I worked with Andrew for a long time and he's one of my closest friends, so that's always a pleasure. And working with Brad and Rob, they're just so easy to, because we all know each other now as well, it's so easy to talk to them and they're so involved in doing it. So I can say to Rob, can you do all this really cool kind of period setting advertising awnings on the buildings and street signs and stuff? And he's up for it because he's great, he's passionate and he's interested. And then he works directly with Brad to make sure they all work together. And you think this is great, what a team. I've been genuinely proud to have that book out. And I say I haven't been this passionate for a long time.
Well, I'm very happy for you. Brian, I think it's well deserved. The career that you've put out for fans like me over the last, I don't know how many years. I think it's well deserved that you get an opportunity to put a passion project out there that we can all enjoy. I will tell you, I read it. I absolutely enjoyed it. And for anybody listening who hasn't jumped on the Ghost Machine train, you better get on it because amazing stories. We got our first three out yesterday and a lot more to come. And I'm so glad that this is going to be a long-term passion project for you, Bryan. I cannot wait to see what happens to Simon in the near future. It sounds like he's going to get himself into a little bit of trouble, which is a lot of fun. And I can't wait to see the development of him as a human being and all the things that he learns going through all these experiences. But Bryan, I can't tell you how much I appreciate meeting you. Huge fan. And I hope we could do this again one time. But thank you so much. I really
My
appreciate you.
pleasure. Thank you. It's very kind of you to have me on.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you again. Everybody, get to your local comic book store, making sure you're picking up Redcoat, Geiger, and Rook Exodus. All of these are available right now. They dropped yesterday. It's really Ghost Machine week because this is probably the biggest thing that's dropped all week. So get out there to your local comic book store and pick those up. But Bryan, hope you have a wonderful rest of your week and we'll talk soon.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. All right, hold on real quick.